Wonderful auditorium space. It's a magnificent building in and out, and we should have the vision to say that we are going to make this a major part of St. Augustine's presentation to the world, and that our tours will not just go around a circumscribed area, but they'll include the Excelsior Museum and the old Excelsior School, and they will go on up to Fort Mose, and we will really integrate the telling of our history. So I'm not going to go on and on today, but I want to tell you that inside this building are the greatest historic find of St. Augustine probably in my lifetime. And it's courtesy of Reverend Rawls here and of the hard work of Shirley, who is there with her camera, and Gwendolyn Duncan and others who helped her. The entire day-to-day records of the civil rights struggle in St. Augustine were lost for half a century and then found in the old Echo House building. They include reports of who went where, who got arrested, who went to the hospital after a beating. These are the kind of things that the Smithsonian will be beating down our door to try and get, and they are saved here for St. Augustine, and they are here in this building, and it's really one of the great treasures of American history that we have saved. So, without further ado, let me introduce to you not somebody who tells you history at second hand, but somebody who lived history at first hand. My friend, the Vice President of Accord, Mrs. Cora Tyson. Will you join us, Mrs. Tyson? If Mrs. Tyson could charge royalties on the number of times her name is mentioned by tour trains driving past her house, she would be the richest person in St. Augustine.
What can I say? I was in the movement. I was not in the violent part. I was sitting on the side. And I watched the violent part. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Yes. It's a subject that I, as one person, doesn't like to talk about. And I know I should because I know a lot. But it's something that's deep down that I never thought that would happen in St. Augustine. And I guess it was a trust that I had in the community that was broken. I don't like to talk about it. I know I should. I know I should get a pencil or a pen and sit down and write some of these things down. I used to go to the schools and talk to the children. I would sit there and I'd be crying and children crying. I couldn't do that anymore. And today, I am 92 years old. And this day, I do not like to talk about it. If someone asks me something, I'll tell you about what I know. But just to sit here and talk to you and tell you the things that happened, I can't do it. I can't. I'm getting choked up now because of the things that I remember back in those days. And if anyone have any questions to ask me, I will try to answer them for you. But that is how I feel, and I want you to know how I feel. It's just one of those things. 92 years old, I can feel that way, can't I?
Yes, ma'am.
And all I have to say to you, thank you for coming. You look good, and it's so nice to have you with us with the museum. It's a struggle, but we are still struggling, and we are asking the Master to go with us. Thank you.
Mrs. Tyson was one of the legendary house mothers of the civil rights movement in St. Augustine, and she was wise enough to ask her house guests to sign the family Bible. And you'll see those pages from it on display in the museum. They've been on display in the Capitol in Tallahassee. It was signed by Martin Luther King, Andrew Young, Ralph David Abernathy, Dorothy Cotton, Hosea Williams, on, a who's who of the civil rights movement, one of the great artifacts that we have, courtesy of Mrs. Tyson. Thank you so much. Never give a historian a microphone and think that he won't give you a history lesson. There is a reason why this is one of the new buildings here. And in fact, it's, I think, the only mid-century, mid-20th century building to have been restored in St. Augustine. It has wonderful space-age light fixtures that you'll see inside, and it has wonderfully patterned tile work on the floor. But there was an older house here, and it was the home of one of 3 black Confederate veterans from the Civil War in St. Augustine. He lived in the old house there. It has been torn down and replaced by this one, but I think how interesting a historic feature that one of 3 black Confederate veterans lived here, and then Dr. Hayling had his office here. And you know, when Dr. Hayling had his office here, part of the building was given over to lawyers, and some of you may have come recently when one of those lawyers returned to town for the first time in half a century. And what they did was all our local lawyers at that time were white, and they did not handle civil rights cases. So black lawyers from Daytona and Jacksonville, one of whom became a Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court, and one of whom became the first black president of the Jacksonville City Council. They gave what help they could, but there were so many arrests in the demonstrations that an appeal was put out to lawyers around the country to come to St. Augustine and give up their summer vacation. They'd come for a week or 2 weeks, and they had a kind of a tag team. And there was an office in there, and they would stack up all the legal papers, and last week's lawyer would hand them off to next week's lawyer. And some of these became extremely distinguished American lawyers. So the list of people who came through here in 1964 is truly extraordinary. Outstanding lawyers from around the country. And then, of course, we had the largest mass arrest of rabbis in American history. These were young men then, but they came back in 2014 for the 50th anniversary, many of them on walkers, some of them had passed away. But all of them, as I looked them up on the internet and tried to find out about them, almost everybody who came here said, one of the most important experiences of my life was going to St. Augustine, Florida in 1964. So the effect that you had, the ripple effect of the St. Augustine movement was incredible. And of course the St. Augustine movement was the last great campaign that led directly to the passage of the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964. And this was the law that outlawed segregated hotels, motels, restaurants, and also it outlawed job discrimination, and not just for blacks, but for women. So when you think of the vast change in the looks of the American workforce over the last half century, that grew out of these demonstrations here in St. Augustine. As somebody has said, that white women were the greatest beneficiaries of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Now we have a special guest with us today. I can't always produce him out of my hat, but I know when it's time to show up, because we are in the presence of great history. Dr. Robert B. Hayling has arrived on the scene. Will you speak, Dr. Hayling? It is so good to see you.
Surprises to be able to report the 5 o'clock traffic of St. Augustine. I consider that a blessing. With that much commerce and traffic and everything else, means that St. Augustine is good. And I hope that that will perpetuate itself throughout the community and something we call prosperity. Thank you so much, good people, for coming. I'm looking at all the friendly faces and what have you. This is the kind of thing that, is this for real?
Love you.
St. Augustine, our nation's oldest city, has a lot to make up for, but also has a lot to contribute. And I hope that many of you, and I know one that's standing to my right, has been such a contributor that we stand in awe of his greatness as a historian and a humanitarian. So please, good people, I don't think you were expecting a prepared speech or anything like that. I'm just so happy to be here. I spoke with my daughter last night in California and told her I was headed to St. Augustine. And she said, "Oh, how great, Daddy." And I said, "Oh, but one thing, Crystal, before I get there, I always bring rain." And she said, "Please come, hurry and visit California." And lo and behold, last night, the rain started.
All right.
And before I could even pack my car and what have you, it was raining cats and dogs in St. Augustine. So some of my delay in getting up here today was due to rain. And we had rain all the way until about Central Florida. So it's the kind of thing that I'm going to consider myself the rainmaker. Every time I've been up this year, it's been involved with rain, coming or going, rain. So thank you, good people, and I wish or hope that I will have a chance to at least shake each and every one of you and your hand, and at least hear a voice saying something about your involvement or what you're up to. And I hope it isn't mystery. It's good things. This nation needs some. I kid with Eric quite often. We talk about the stars aligning. And sometimes we hit a lucky street, and then sometimes we hit a street that Reverend Rawls has to help us with.
All right.
And I have a state dignitary with us, and whatever he told me last night, said, "Doc, I'm coming, but I'm going to have to leave." I said, "Your presence anytime for a moment or two is a blessing." So we have ex-Senator Tony Hill here. Many of you who should have acknowledgments and so forth, if I have not mentioned you, please understand that these I'm mentioning I recognize right off. But I'm sure as we follow through whatever the other proceedings are, if I have to make amends and come up back to the mic and acknowledge some of our distinguished guests, I would be happy to do that. For every one of you to give up your time and your energy at this important time in the day to come and say hello to each of us and say what you have done and what we're trying to do. And because, as I said, St. Augustine has quite a bit to make up for. Our nation's oldest city almost earned the tag of the nation's most racist city. And many of us suffered from that, and many of us are now still trying to correct it. And we're hoping that we're on the right track. Thank you so much, and thank you for being here, and thank you for whatever you're doing. And if I can help in any small way, please let me know, and I'll be happy to do whatever you ask of me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hayling. And if you are like me, you will want to get his autograph before you leave here today. And if you haven't had a chance to go through the museum yet, we will be glad to give small guided tours to groups while you're here so you can appreciate some of the treasures that are contained in here. Thank you, Dave Chatterton, for setting this up, and all of you for coming. And I hope this will be the beginning and not the end of a long collaboration. Thank you.
Well, I told you we had a big surprise for you tonight, and I tell you what, thank you so much, David, Dr. Haley. Thank you so much, David and Miss Tyson. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and the Accord Museum. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. And I tell you, this being our first meeting where we're returning the Tourism Hospitality Council, I'm not sure how we're gonna top this one. This was an amazing night, and like David said, please don't run away if you have time. If you haven't been through the museum, please do. I of course have. It's one of the reasons we're here tonight. I was so moved the first time that I went through the museum and heard the story. It's overwhelming, and I hope you have the same experience that I did. I'm sure you will. Again, thank you for coming tonight.